Welcome to Spanglish Friends, the podcast for true beginner Spanish learners.
Hola amigos, I'm Val, your co-host and experienced Spanish teacher from Venezuela.
And I'm Em, your Australian co-host who's been learning Spanish for 10 years.
Our goal is simple, to get you confident listening and speaking in beginner Spanish with content you'll actually use in real-life conversations.
Join the Spanish Friends community by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts and following us on social media at Spanglish_Friends. Let's get started.
Comencemos.
Hola, hola amigos, and welcome back.
Hello, hello. How are you, Spanglish friends? Welcome to episode 4, episodio 4 of the podcast.
Yes, I can't believe we're up to episode 4 already. Time really does fly when you're having fun. Hey, Val.
Absolutely am. Today's episode forms the first part of a 3-part series.
That's right. And throughout the 3-part series, we're going to be answering the big question beginners are probably asking themselves, which is, how do you pronounce stuff in Spanish?
That is a very common question, and we promise, Spanglish friends, by the end of this next 3 podcasts, episode 4, episode 5, and 6, you are going to be able to pick up any Spanish book, lyrics to a song in Spanish, and you are going to be able to pronounce every single word of that page correctly.
What? Are you serious, Val?
That's right. Now, obviously, you're not going to know the meaning of every word yet. That comes with time, all right? But you are going to be able to pronounce every single word.
That is amazing. Just imagine that, Spanglish friends. I want you to cast your mind back, if you're a native English speaker, to your first few years of learning English. Okay, for many of us as 5 or 6-year-old children, in 60 minutes with 3 podcasts, you're going to be able to do something that took you potentially your first few years of primary school in English to be able to learn these various sound combinations and actually read a piece of text. Isn't that incredible?
It's incredible. At the end of these 3 episodes, you could pick up, for example, a menu in Spanish at a restaurant and pronounce everything correctly and not sound, like a foreigner, or be able to spell your name, tu nombre, and your last name, tu apellido, in Spanish.
That's right. This episode is going to be so practical and bite-sized to kick this series off. At the end of part 1 today, you're going to be able to answer these 3 questions confidently. Question number 1. Does Spanish pronunciation follow a set of rules? Question number 2. Are there any sneaky silent letters in Spanish that you need to be aware of? And number 3, what are these accents on top of Spanish letters? What are they for and how do you read them?
Love it, Em. So let's jump straight into it.
That's right. Strap your seatbelt on. We're heading back to primary school and the basics of language.
Awesome. Question 1 that you need to be able to answer as a beginner learner is, does the Spanish pronunciation follow a set of rules?
And the answer is, drum roll, yes! Woohoo!
We are winning already.
Absolutely. And this is what makes Spanish such a great language to learn and something that I loved as a beginner Spanish learners. Not only do they use the same alphabet as English, unlike languages like Japanese where you have to learn a whole new set of characters as well, the language is also phonetic. Now, what that means is that Spanish is pronounced exactly as it's written. 1 letter in Spanish equals 1 sound.
Now, if you have only ever learned English, you may be thinking, but wait, isn't English pronounced as it's written?
That's right. You might not even remember all the letter combinations as a native English speaker that you subconsciously learnt back in primary school. Okay? In Spanish, each letter generally represents 1 sound only. This is not the case in English, where 1 letter can represent different sounds. Let me give you an example. For example, the letter C in the word cat versus the C in the word circle. Circle versus K in cat. K versus S. Okay, really cast your mind back to all the different sound combos we have in English. Like the th sound how it's different, the TH in think versus that. They are two different sounds, but they are written the same. Or like the R in red versus the R in car. Red, versus car, R. They are two different sounds again. Or the SH sound in the words like she, sh, versus fish, which is fish. These are
Yeah.
completely different sounds that are subconsciously in our brain in English.
It's confusing, isn't it? Or it's just me?
Yes. No, it is very confusing. Honestly, the more I started to learn Spanish, I was like, wow, I realize how difficult English is for non-native speakers because of all of these tricky sound combinations and just how much easier it is to learn Spanish as a beginner.
Exactly. So that's the amazing thing about Spanish, in my opinion. The pronunciation of a word is mostly determined by its spelling. If you know how each letter sounds, you can usually pronounce the word correctly without needing to memorize special rules. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is just so amazing. And that is how you could, in theory, pick up the first page of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in Spanish and you could read it. You wouldn't know the meaning of the words, but you would be able to pronounce every word properly.
Awesome. Let me give you a simple example to bring it to life. The word cat in Spanish means gato. Gato. Here, the G is always pronounced like a hard G, like the word, for example, go in English. And the A is always going to be A.
So it's always gato. It will always be pronounced that way. And that means the best thing about writing down Spanish is that you make fewer spelling errors. Since the Spanish pronunciation follows clear patterns and the vowels are consistent, a reminder taking us back to primary school, your vowels are your A, E, I, O, U sounds. We'll get to that in the next episode. Learning to pronounce words will help you automatically know how to write them. Now, I say this as an English speaker. I still am constantly spell checking the words I write in English. Like the word thorough. I can never figure out how to write the word thorough because it has so many different sounds in it. I actually spell check it to write it down for this exact example. No lie. I spell better in Spanish than I do in English because the phonetics are so easy.
That's so funny, Em. I'm always using a spell check in English too. One other thing that makes Spanish in some aspects easier than in English to pronounce is that Spanish really doesn't have a sneaky silent letter, unlike English, where you have words like night or dough with silent letters.
Yeah, like KNIGHT, night, and though, which is just so sneaky. We also have words like pterodactyl that starts with the P.
I love the random dinosaur example. Thank you. But yes, tell me about it. This was so confusing learning English.
Yes, but there is one exception you need to know in Spanish, isn't there, Val? And this brings us to our second question that we're answering in today's podcast. Are there sneaky letters, silent letters in Spanish?
Yes.
There is one sneaky letter that is silent.
That's right, and that is the letter H, H in Spanish. For example, the word hola, which means hello, is pronounced like O-L-A, the pronunciation, hola. The H in the beginning is silent at the moment you pronounce the word.
That's right. The H is the only silent letter you need to remember in Spanish. So now, anytime you see a Spanish document, a Spanish set of lyrics, and you see the letter H, don't pronounce it. Pretend it's not even there.
The hallmark of a beginner learner pronouncing the H in words like hola, they could say hola with the H instead of hola. So if you want to be able to sound like a true Spanish speaker, drop the H. Words like hombre, man, instead of hombre. We have another examples like hijo, which means son, hija, which means daughter. They have an H in the beginning. Just imagine it's not there and go straight to pronouncing the second letter of the word.
But Val, I just want to double check here. Are there any sneaky exceptions that we need to be aware of with the letter H?
Well, the answer is no. Exceptions really only apply to foreigner words, like words that are not Spanish, like the name of a town or words like hobby.
That's it. Okay. Fabulous, Spanglish friends. Now you can confidently answer the question, does Spanish pronunciation follow a set of rules? Yes.
Yes.
And you know to keep the H silent, that sneaky letter. The final thing I want to move on to is accents, which is something English doesn't have. I'm not talking about the accent that comes out of your voice like bonjour, okay? I'm talking about the little diagonal lines on the top of letters. It brings us to our third and final question of the day, Val. What are these accents on top of letters about?
That is a common question for beginner learners. What are the accents for and how do I read them? Is very common question. Well, some letters in Spanish words have accent on the top of them. They are funny little slanted lines on the top of vowels and only vowels, which are the A, E, I, O, U are in Spanish A, E, I, O, U. We call these little lines tilde.
That's right. That little accent is called a tilde. And Spanish has these little tildes, little accents on top of the vowels to help emphasize where the stress falls in a word.
That's right.
But the pronunciation of the actual vowel, the a, e, I, o, u, does not change because it has an accent on the top of it. So I'll give you an example. The word café. Café means coffee. Now, there is an accent, a little diagonal line on top of the E, C-A-F-E, café. The accent tells me that the stress of the word falls on the second syllable, the second group of sounds, the F-E, the fe. But the vowel sounds are still a, ga, and fe, the E, versus in English, stress can sometimes change the pronunciation of the vowel itself, like the word permit, P-E-M-I-T, versus permit, which is to allow someone to do something. It's the exact same spelling, but the stress there has changed the meaning of the word. This is probably blowing some English speakers' minds learning about English.
That's right. Let me give a practical example about this accent. The word destinación, which means destination, the tilde, the accent, is on the O, above the O. So I know that ción, last syllable of the word, needs to have the strongest emphasis. And I pronounce all the word as it's written. Doesn't change.
That's right. And it's super handy because these tildes, these accents, they're basically our cheat code as beginners to know how to pronounce words. I wish we had this in English.
Me too. I wish it. These accents also serve another purpose. They help us to distinguish between two words that are spelled the same, but they have different meanings. Let me give you an example. The word camino without an accent means path. Like if you are having a hike, you walk through a path, right? That is camino, el camino. But then you can also say caminó, caminó, with accent on the O. That is he or she walked, is the past tense of to walk.
Yes, that's right, Val. Just with the accent on top of the letter, you've changed the meaning of the word. And that's so super handy because in English, we have so many words that are spelt the same but are pronounced differently. Okay, don't believe me? Think of the word lead, L-E-A-D, to lead a group of people, and lead, the metal. Okay, they're both spelled L-E-A-D. Or to wind a clock, spelled W-I-N-D, versus the wind, also spelled W-I-N-D, like the breeze. Okay, what about read and read, or minute versus minute? Okay, they are the same spelling. The list goes on and on. Whereas Spanish give you the accent and they clearly distinguish how you should be pronouncing it and which version of the word they're talking about.
This brings all the memories when I was learning how to read in English.
So confusing.
Talk about confusing English. Dios mío. So we love accents in Spanish because in summary, they tell us two things, okay? How to put emphasis on the word and the meaning of the word if it's spelled the same, like camino and camino.
That's right. And Val, tell us, what do we do when a word doesn't have an accent on top of any of the vowels? Like, how do we know in those cases what part of the word we should be emphasizing?
Well, that's a good question. In general, if it's a word with two syllables or more, you are normally going to emphasize on the second or second to last syllable.
Hang on, Val, just remind us again, because we've said syllable a lot. Remind us what is a syllable for those of us who haven't been in primary school for a while.
Great, sure. A syllable is a unit of sound. in a word that usually contains a vowel sound, and it's the building block of pronunciation. For example, the word computer. This has 3 syllables, computer, with each part representing a separate beat or rhythm in the word.
That's right. So it's that unit of sound. So in Spanish, when we have a word that's written completely without any accents, any little lines above the vowels, a, e, I, o, u, the a, e, I, o, u, we are going to put emphasis on the second to last syllable in general. Let's help bring that to life, Val.
For example, the word casa. Casa means house in Spanish, a 2-syllable word, right? Casa. The emphasis is on the ka, C-A, ka, the syllable. But a 3-syllable word, for example, familia, familia, which means family, again has no accent, but I know to emphasize in me. My final example is of a 4-syllable word. Estudiante, estudiante. The emphasis is on the diam, the second to last syllable.
Okay, so if we're going to remember anything, Spanglish friends, it's that the longer the word is in 2-syllable, the stress is going to be on the last or the second to last syllable. And that's, I guess, why my name in Spanish, Emily, is pronounced Emily, Emily. The accent, the emphasis is on the me, even though there is no accent because it's that second to last syllable. Is that right, Val?
Yes, that's 100% correct, Emmy. Tú eres una muy buena estudiante. You are a good student.
Thanks, Val. Thanks, Profe. Okay, amigos, we know now we've got all this information, the brain juices are flowing. We know if we're going to learn it, we need to put it into active practice. That's how we store long-term memory in our brains. And the best part of our Spanglish Friends podcast is coming now because we're going to have a conversation, una conversación, using the material we have just learnt today, plus building on the concepts we learnt in our first content episode, episodio 3, to introduce ourselves.
Great. So let's set the scene for today's practice conversation. Let's imagine I'm in a grocery store and I'm about to buy an ice cream from our cashier, Emmy.
Yes, so we're going to have a very quick little interaction that, Spanglish friends, you could practically use tomorrow if you're going to go and buy something from a store in Spanish. Pay attention to the transcript if that's going to be useful to understand how we pronounce the words based on their syllables. Are you ready, Profe Val?
Sí, sí, sí. Comencemos. Buenos días. ¿Cómo está usted?
Hola, muy bien, gracias.
¿Me da un helado, por favor?
Sí, claro.
Ah, y una bebida con hielo.
¿Qué tiene?
Oh, gracias. Chao.
Ciao. Awesome, amigos. How did you go with that quick little conversation? Did you pick up some familiar words? Did you know what was going on? Are things starting to click?
Again, don't worry if you didn't catch every word. That's not the point, okay?
No.
The point is that you are starting to listen and understand Spanish conversation that you could actually use in real life, applying the concepts we are learning each episode.
That's right. I couldn't say it better, Val. So to kick off our debrief, our lowdown, all right, we collectively said in that conversation 3 words that started with the letter H, Ache. Notice how you didn't hear any of them? We pretended like they weren't there. We said 3 words. We said hola instead of hola. We said hola, which means hello. We said helado, helado instead of helado, which means ice cream. And we said hielo instead of hielo, which means ice.
Also, I used the sentence me da un helado, por favor, which means, can I have an ice cream, please? Me da un helado, por favor. This sentence will be useful any moment you want to buy something in a shop. And don't forget always to say por favor. which means please. In the end, always is good to be polite, whatever language you are going to speak.
Sí, por favor. Use the por favor. You can start using this phrase me da to start ordering food or drinks now in Spanish. You can say me da un helado, por favor. Me da un taco. Can you give me a taco, please? Or me da un burrito. Can you give me a burrito? Like, you can start using this language now. And Val, you also said una bebida, which is how do you say a drink? Me da una bebida? Plus, Val also used the Y as the E joining sound we used last podcast where we said y tú. She used it as a joining word between sentences when she said y una bebida. Y una bebida. It's written like the letter Y in English, but it's pronounced like the double E sound in English. E.
Plus, I asked Em, ¿Cómo está usted? ¿Cómo está usted? If you remember from episode 3, where we learned how to introduce yourself in Spanish, this means how are you in a formal way, compared to ¿Cómo estás tú? Which also means how are you, but informally. ¿Cómo estás tú?
That's right. And when I responded to Val's question, if she could have a drink with ice, I said, aquí tiene, aquí tiene, which means here it is, like here is this thing. And Val, at the very, very start of our conversation, you said, buenos dias. This is a very common phrase you can start to use, which means good morning. Like, how are you? Buenos dias.
Great. All right, Spanglish friends, give yourself a pat on the back. You've done it.
Whoa!
You officially know how to start pronouncing stuff in Spanish, how to start pronouncing words, even though you don't know the meanings. This
That's
brings
it.
us to the 3 things you need to remember from today's episode. If you only remember 3 things, they should be: number 1, Spanish is a phonetic language. You pronounce the letters as they are written. 1 syllable equals 1 sound. Number 2, accents in Spanish go above the vowels only. They indicate the emphasis. They can also change the meaning of the word, like camino versus camino. And number 3, the H, the H in Spanish is silent. Don't say again hola, say hola.
Yes, that's it. Well done, amigos. And now on to our reto of the week, our challenge of the week. Your challenge, Spanglish friends, is to googlear, to look up a word starting with H, the letter H. Ache. Pop it in the comments with your answer. We would love to see what examples you find, and then try to pronounce the word out loud. Try practicing the word. Remember, the H is silent. Go straight onto the second letter and pretend like the first letter does not exist.
Amazing, Em. Thank you. With this episode, we officially closed part 1 of our crash course on how to pronounce words in Spanish.
That's it. And in part 2, next episode, released next week, we are going to dive into how do you read and pronounce the vowels in Spanish? Like we've sort of previewed today, the A, E, I, O, U, those hallmarks of a language, the A, E, I, O, U. We're going to teach you how to pronounce it. Plus, extra little tricky letters in Spanish, which don't always sound exactly alike, but you need to know in order to start memorizing, for example, the lyrics to a song.
We will catch up next week, Spanish friends. Thank you so much, and hasta luego.
Ciao, amigos. Hasta la próxima, Spanglish friends. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Spanglish Friends. We are both so proud of the time you're investing to level up your Spanish listening and speaking skills.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, follow us and give the show a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Or even better, tell a friend about the show. It's how we can help even more people on their Spanish learning journeys and continue to grow our awesome, supportive community.
Don't forget to check out our socials, including Instagram and TikTok at Spanglish_friends for even more beginner Spanish fun.
Congratulations on taking another step today towards your Spanish learning goals. Ciao, Spanglish amigos. Until next time.
Hasta la próxima, amigos.